All right, so our final panel here today, 3 more hosts, which this is going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to go through one at a time. We'll start with Jason Shupp. So a little bit about your background and about your show.
I'm a legacy business owner, 3rd generation of a construction business, in the process of exiting out of that with the recent partnership, which conveniently is going to spend a lot more time with the podcast.
Which we like to hear on the podcast agency. I like that.
My show is called From There to Here. It's unconventional origin stories of entrepreneurs and experts, where we dive into the nuance and the context that led to the inflection points that have created pivots and personally and professionally in their lives that have shaped who they've become. And we like to spend more time, what I say, in the space in between the milestones to really understand that context that's got them from there to here.
Awesome. Don Booth. Don, same thing. A little bit about your background and about your show.
Well, I'm the CEO, founder of the American Institute of Non-Destructive Testing. It's kind of a mouthful. Most people look at you funny when you say non-destructive testing. It's using X-ray and ultrasound, magnetic particle, eddy current, and other modalities of inspection for spacecraft, aircraft, bridges, pipelines, nuclear facilities, so we do training globally. I founded it in 2013. My show is, I think I'm finally finding my feet for it, and my 7th episode went out today, but
number 7, you're almost in double figures.
Yeah,
Come on.
getting there. And it's about,
We're getting there.
I think I'm realizing that it's about making entrepreneurs, saving them a lot of pain, hopefully, by explaining things, mistakes that I've made in the past, and the failures and the successes and overcoming them, and that they're not alone. And because it's lonely as an entrepreneur sometimes, and you're in there and you're thinking, man, nobody's gone through this before. Yes, they have. And I want to bring in people and hear their stories and hopefully help save some pain in the process.
Yeah. And Jason, I didn't get this. How many episodes in are you? Forgot to ask you.
I think I'm at 68 right now.
And Matt, we have there's some more audience members here who maybe didn't catch your morning performance.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah, a little bit about your show.
So, about the show?
Yeah, both.
All right. Well, I'm the director of agency or head of the podcast agency at Mission Matters. So everything podcast related I do. And I tell you what, I just couldn't get enough podcasts, so I decided to create one myself 2.5 years ago, which as a former professional golfer, now a golf hack that just sits there and talks about other golfers and how bad they are, even though they're a lot better than I am. That is basically the nutshell of my show, but it's an unfiltered golf podcast. So I decided, you know what, I came as a kid out of upstate New York that played every sport possible. And then all of a sudden I got into golf. And when I got into golf, I'm like, this is real stuffy, most people say, but this is just like any other locker room. I'm like, shoot, this isn't a gentleman's sport. This is a real sport. People talk trash. We're gambling out there. This is not what they make it out to be on the PGA Tour and so forth. So I'm like, you know what? When I started this podcast, I go, I want something real. I don't want that PC BS that's out there. I want something that people can really relate to and be like, hey, that's like me when I go out with my buddies. We're like, oh, shoot, we're going to have a couple drinks, we're going to have some fun. And I used to have a glass of scotch every single episode. And that was my way to kind of loosen up a little bit and start to get into that form. Now I've done it so often that I'm like, I don't even drink anymore. I'm just like, oh, let's shoot the shit, let's go. So that's a little bit of background of pull hook golf.
All right, so we learned a little bit about Matt's creative process and how he loosens up. Jason, your creative process in how you go about producing your show. Now you're, I think, 1.5 years in or so, roughly?
Oh, well,
2?
First cohort, so it's
Yeah,
2.
yeah, it's going on 2. Yeah, it might be over that, yeah. So your creative process now, maybe even when you started to now, like what that journey's been like for you.
Well, the premise of my show lets me be less prepared than probably most shows probably would want to. I used to, like was echoed in earlier ones, had a little bit more structure. I would scrub LinkedIn details about my guest, and I would make some notes of things that I thought would be of interest. And then early on, I had an episode where where I asked one of my prepared questions, and she threw me for a complete loop. And I immediately realized that
Was that the good stuff too? Like
well,
that
it was yes, it was great content, but I realized that my notes were irrelevant, and I actually wadded up my show notes and threw them in the trash can, while we were recording. And what I learned is that at that moment, what I need to be is completely engaged in the conversation and listening intently to what they're saying. And if I'm paying attention to what I want to ask, ahead of time, I'm not paying attention to what I should ask during the actual conversation. So now when I go into it, I still have 3 prepared questions, which are very, very, don't influence the story at all. But what I've realized is, with the premise of my show is I want to honor the story of my guest. And the more prepared I am, the more I'm directing their story to how I think that it should go, rather than listening and asking questions that let them tell their story authentically for themselves. And again, with the premise of my show, that's my job, is to honor their story, not to change their story or correct their story.
Was it easy to make that transition or that shift? Was it like immediate, like you threw it away? I mean, and probably everybody won't get this reference, but like Lil Wayne, getting rid of his notebooks. A couple you got that. Probably not everybody, but it's okay.
It was immediate. I mean, I stopped doing show notes beforehand for every episode after that. And I think a lot of that would be, it wasn't hard for me because I'm a very curious person, and I like to think that I have the ability to process information pretty quickly, so that I can ask very genuine questions without having to grasp for what I want to ask. I mean, things just come to me pretty quickly when I'm immersed in that conversation. So that made the transition easy. But as far as realizing that that's the direction I should go, that wasn't a struggle at all. That's what's going to give me presence, real presence and authenticity during the conversations.
Do you feel like it gets easier with time? Like the more episodes you're doing, the more you get into it, the more experiences you have to share from being behind the mic? Because it's a little different than just having a conversation with somebody sometimes. Or am I off?
No, it absolutely gets easier, and not just from the comfort level of just doing it more, but I've grown so much as just through my abilities of conversation, how it's changed me as a person, like intrinsically makes the process easier because I'm listening better. I'm just more receptive to just to the nuances of conversation better. So those tactical abilities in me that have improved from the show is what's made it easier, more so than just the repetition of doing the show.
And that's why we talk about that pretty often, about like a host finding their voice, or taking time to grow into those shoes and to let the show develop and almost come to them while they're going through the act of recording and going through that process, because it's going to continue to evolve like over time. My show, I mean, it evolves every week, I feel like, and it's only moving faster based on content and based on even trends, just even the conversations you're having, because I have a pretty broad show, and based on what Jason's doing, you can have a lot of different guests as well. So I see some similarities there. Don, so your show and your process, first off, your wife is here today, right?
Absolutely.
So other than, so it's like, it's a team. What I love about this is, and even since we talked about it in the beginning, it's a team and it's a family affair, the way I see your podcast developing, like who's coming on the show, what's next, ideas, things like that. Like, and I'm not saying the other hosts don't have that, I just haven't had those conversations maybe with them, but I love the way the show's coming along. What's your process so far, and how does the team work?
Well, that is evolving, just like everything, right? I'm finding the process is changing for me dramatically, real quickly. I mean, I'm building out, I have a PowerPoint template that I build out before with the host's bio and some questions I want to bring out of them. But I'm finding as I go through these episodes that it's never going to work out the way you lay it out. And all of a sudden they're going to answer a question that you haven't asked them yet, and it's 7 slides down. So you quickly scroll down and delete that one, or drag it up, or, so it's evolving quickly for me. And the last one was really nice. It was 57 minutes. We talked about time, a few people. And I agree, it's like, as long as it's interesting. Now, this last one that launched today, amazing woman from Costa Rica, which wasn't my wife, but we know her. But it ended with, she just said, I just want to bring this to children and help change their lives, and that's my dream and goal. And I just knew, I said, that's a perfect time to end this. Let's end it on that note, and it just brought you right out, right?
Yeah.
It brought the whole thing full circle. So I'm learning to do what you've learned to do, and that's that. Don't overdo it. Have that conversation and listen to them. And I'm pretty quick at processing things as well. So just to come up with a natural flow. So I think that's what I'm doing.
Amazing. Matt, so you 2.5 years now, I think you mentioned.
Yeah.
So from beginning to where you're at now, talk a little bit about your process.
I mean, my process, I build out an episode outline for every single show. However, I don't overcomplicate it. Think of being in probably 7th grade and having to build out an outline for a teacher. It's like 1 to 2 words that just keep me on track and keeps the guests on track as well, because guess what? Nobody ever looks at it. So they come in and they're totally fresh. And as soon as they start going down a rabbit hole, I'm like, whoop, right back. Here we go. So I'll redirect with another question or a follow-up question in order to get them right back on track. But that process really hasn't changed since the very beginning, which is weird because it's something that I kind of stress to everybody that, hey, don't overcomplicate this. Don't script out your show, because then it's going to be unnatural. You're going to be reading off of your screen, and unless you are at ESPN or one of the other broadcast groups to where you're reading and really good at reading a teleprompter without moving your eyes, which is very complicated, by the way. I've tried it, not good at it. So we'll see anyways, down the road, maybe I'll do that. But no, right now, it is all about creating great conversations. And you have to be present. You have to listen to the answers, because I never write follow-up questions. That's all me on the fly, being able to stay on topic, but dig deeper. Ask that second, third level question in order to really get to it. Because I deal with caddies, PGA Tour players, golf instructors that want to try it because they're used to all the PC interviews. So all their answers are normally very PC to begin with. Guess what? I gotta keep digging. And then all of a sudden they get loosened up. And guess what? That's where the special sauce is, to where all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, did he just say that? That's incredible. So, and of course might get him into trouble, but that's okay. That's fine. He'll get over it. And that's my creative process.
So we've talked a lot today about the host side of things, but I know some people are interested in being guests on more shows. What do you look for in great guests? Like, how do you decide who you're going to invite in, number one, and then any preparation go into like easing them into the show? Like, what's that part of the process? So from the guest.
Well, with my show, the premise is, again, unconventional origin stories, which I try to stay as true to that as possible. So there's a bit of a vetting process on those who had some non-linear lives. I have found that everyone has a version of that. So really anyone could be a guest, because there's going to be amazing nuance behind whatever track they take, even if it's seemingly linear. As far as preparing my guests, I send out a little email just to give them the general details of what to expect. It's audio only, so they're not stressing over the video piece of it, things like that, and the 3 questions I ask, so they can have a little bit of a preparation for it. But I don't encourage them to overthink it. I want them to come there just being prepared to talk. But one thing I do remind my guests, and some of us were talking about this earlier today, is that this is for me, it's a person-based show. It's not a cast-based show or a theme-based show, but not to turn into a promotional thing. That's the one thing that's an immediate turn-off. I had one guest that did that. which was very, very challenging. It's my least favorite episode. I almost didn't air it. And it was just constantly getting her back on track of, no, I want to hear about you. Again, you can go on several other podcasts and talk about what it is that you do. So letting people just, reminding them what the purpose of the show is. If they want to sell something, I'm not the product for that.
How about you, Don?
Well, I think I'm just looking for entrepreneurs of any type. I think every entrepreneur has a story. And I'll just talk about my one that launched today is I'm a sucker for the underdog. So I like underdog stories because I consider myself one, and my story's long and interesting too. But the last lady that was on my show, she was like selling homemade peanut butter on the streets of Costa Rica. Had $1,000 in her checking account and launched her therapy business, and now she has hundreds of customers. Amazing story. I love those stories. I almost get choked up when I hear that because it's so touching to me that when people overcome things, And so I think everyone has a story, and so I'm willing to take just about anybody on my show right now, and I think we can bring out some of those stories and challenges and just about anybody who wants to talk about it, because I don't think there's anybody in this world who hasn't been challenged at one time in their life.
So Matt, technically speaking, you were my golf coach. So does that mean that I can come on the show? I'm not invited on Matt's show.
Adam has a golf swing that is unfixable, folks. Like, I have never seen anything like it. It is special in his own way. And I got to a point where
one hole of golf.
I couldn't touch it anymore. I just let him absolutely. That is you. That is your golf game. It's never going to get better. It might actually get worse from here. So just roll with it. And so technically I am your golf coach.
You are my golf coach.
Oh, God. Okay.
So that means
what was the question?
Throw him off with that one, right? Okay, so I can't come on your show, it sounds like.
No, absolutely not. I would never have you on.
How do you vet your guests? Like, what kind of guests do you look for?
I actually reach out to almost every single one of the guests that I have on the show, and they're people that I'm interested in. The one person that was actually kind of interesting to bring onto the show was a PGA Tour player named Kevin Streelman. I'll throw him right under the bus because I was working out with him, and he'd always ask me, because he started listening to the pod, and then he's like, "Hey man, how's the pod going? How's the pod going? How's the pod going?" And I'm like, "Kevin, do you want to come on the pod?" And he's like, "No." I'm like, "Yes, you do." I was like, "Come on." And he was always a very PC guy, like Duke University, like clean cut. And sure enough, I got him on the pod. I got him drinking a little bit. I was like, "We're going to have a bottle of whiskey here on the show." We went through an entire bottle of whiskey. And I got him to open up. We had an absolute blast. And he loved it. And ever since, he's been a little bit more himself in media and in public than he ever has been previously. And he's been a little bit more outspoken about the PGA Tour that he had never done. He was always a company man, always drank the Kool-Aid, not drinking the Kool-Aid anymore. So I normally will go after, and that he was somebody that I probably would have never invited onto the show, but I'm glad that I did. And I have had a few requests. I get quite a few requests every single day, and I normally will try to find somebody that I find interesting, or somebody that I feel like I could break down and break the mold of what they are right now, if they're willing to do that. Some say that they're not willing to do it, and then all of a sudden they get on, and it's a completely different ballgame. I mean, I had one player in particular on, James Hahn, who was talking about how pimps were his pimps in Oakland that used to wear the big yellow or bright green velour suits and everything. He's like, those guys were my role models. And I'm like, you would never know it because of any other media he's ever done. Wow. So that's kind of the secret sauce behind it, is that I normally will look for people that I'm like, okay, who can I have an interesting conversation with, or who can I break the mold of?
So do they all have to be good golfers?
No, but you're not coming on.
They all have to drink whiskey.
Usually that's a prerequisite, but I don't drink anymore. Well, Well, lately I have not drank, so we'll just put it that way, that it is no longer prerequisite. However, it is highly recommended to drink.
So one of the things that a lot of the hosts that I invited here today that are part of the network is we've been having this conversation internally about doing interviews and doing more public interviews and doing them in person because after COVID, so this was basically the network was birthed during COVID, so everything was 100% virtual, myself included for the most part. And now that events are opening up, things are opening up, where I'm encouraging more people to go out and to do interviews in person. So Matt, this one's for you. You've done some interviews in a lot of different places, from barbershops. Just talk about it, because I want you to inspire the other hosts here about, because they just see what I'm doing sometimes, but I want them to hear where you're doing interviews, because this is amazing.
Yeah, so we've done, my barber has a huge community of like professional athletes and everything. Then he cuts a hair, John Rahm, if you know of golfers. But needless to say, I'm like, hey man, we should do a show in here. And he's like, love that idea. So we did a show all around the barber shop and talked golf and talked shop. He even did my hair a little bit, in between little segments and whatnot. Then
Did you do that for a free haircut?
Absolutely, free everything.
Speaking of monetization, you got to be creative with the podcast, see?
It's the Wild West out there, as I like to say. Now, I also have done them at golf courses. We've got a great relationship with this liquor store called Trevor's that actually Dave Portnoy from Barstool, he actually rated their pizza as the best pizza on the West Coast. So literally, I'm going in there and I'm like, hey, can I get a pizza after 5 o'clock? Because they have a rule that you have to dine in order to get a pizza after 5. And I walked out of there and there were eyeballs all over me. People were not happy that I was leaving with a box of full pizza. Unbelievable. But anyways, I get off topic here. This is how the show goes too, by the way. Now, with that, we've done it at golf courses. We will do it at sunset at golf courses. I have a complete cart that I basically show up and do all the setup myself. So it is not something outside of the realm. And I have about 3 lights. And people always ask, they're like, wow, my husband does a podcast, or I do a podcast, and all of a sudden it's like, what are these lights? What do you got going on here? Because this is really cool that you can set up and do everything on site. And you just showed up. And it's like, well, we got invited, but yeah, we kind of just showed up and put it all together. But yeah, and then, gosh, where else? I mean, I was telling my co-host that I was like, hey man, we're basically doing a podcast tour right now. Like, we should actually let people know and start building out an audience. Then we started getting audiences that would start to show up, and it became pretty interesting.
And so for the network, everyone here that's already doing podcasts or otherwise, he says, yeah, but we were invited. Well, I'm experimenting with I wasn't invited. So we did one the other day.
Hang on. I was just about to say, Adam's show, I had some wireless mics. Adam's in Phoenix.
And so these mics, just for context, because and again, this is for the hosts in here, like Corey and Marley and all the other hosts, these mics are next level now. These little Rode mics, you don't have to, he has a cart, he has all these other things, I do too. You don't have to do that anymore. I've already downsized to a very small little bag basically now when I'm going to certain functions where I'm not going to have a huge booth or something. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, and the audio recording, we were testing, we were doing it in the middle of a tailgate. I'll let you finish, Matt.
Oh my God, I got season tickets to the ASU tailgates, okay? And ASU is actually pretty good this year, which is why I'll mention them. Normally I wouldn't, I'll just be like, we go to a tailgate. No, but Adam all of a sudden is like, hey, I got an idea. I got a buddy who's an absolute character. Yeah. Has owned bars throughout Arizona.
Shout out
Kirk Hoffman, and all of a sudden Adam's like, I want to interview Kirk. Yeah. And I was like, well, I haven't talked to Kirk. He goes, screw that. He's like, let me grab your 2 little wireless mics. I'm going to hook one on him, and I'm just going to say, let's go. And sure enough, he did. And it was actually really engaging. I was shocked, but it was really good.
I was shocked too. It was good. You and me both. And the audio quality.
If you can't tell, we've known each other for 20 years.
The audio quality too.
The audio quality was unreal. There's people yelling in the background and everything, but it's very faint. And it's something that with proper audio production, it can be removed from the actual episode. So it's like it never happened at a football tailgate, which is pretty sweet, and it's high quality audio.
Yeah, and the main thing I like to think about is it's fun. Like we did one at Latitude. We literally just set it up in the middle of the thing. We had a couple minutes there, and we just did it right there. And that's coming out actually I think next week. So you'll see. But it's fun. It's fun to not be so stiff and rigid in your show. And what I find too, and what I've gotten feedback from the audience is that like they're following you on that journey as well. And it becomes really interesting because they can even tell. So you're saying, hey, I'm at so-and-so event, or hey, I'm here, and they feel like they're with you as they're going through. So that's been a fun part of it.
Gives a different feel.
Yeah, I'm in.